Welcome, welcome. I'm so glad that you could join me here today. My name is Heidi Roth, and I'm a registered dietitian. And today is October 1st, and we're going to be cooking with some pumpkin spice. I'm assuming everyone here loves pumpkin spice and wants to learn a little bit more about how to do some more things with it. I do have my laptop open in front of me. So if you have any questions, I have the chat box open and love to hear from you all while I'm talking and while I'm cooking. Sometimes it's nice to be able to ask questions right in the moment. I will also show you the recipes at the end so that you can take a screenshot of the recipes at the end as well. Okay, so let's get cooking. We're going to be making two things. We're going to be making a spiced pumpkin soup, and then we're also going to be making a breakfast dish of a baked oatmeal with pumpkin spice. So for my pumpkin spice soup, I'm going to start with browning an onion. So I've got an onion that I've diced up small, and I'm going to go ahead and put it into my pan with about a tablespoon of extra virgin olive oil. So kind of just throw that in. I'll throw the onion in and get that cooking as well. Okay. So while that's starting to cook, let me tell you a little bit about what all else is going to go into the soup. So this soup is just such an easy soup to make. It uses a little bit of warming spices. It uses a whole can of pumpkin, some chicken broth, 2 cups of chicken broth, some garlic, and then of course our spices. And oh, and some apple cider as well. So I'm going to go ahead and open up my can of pumpkin. And pumpkin it's great. These cans of pureed pumpkin are so easy to use. But one thing you want to be careful of is that you're not buying the pumpkin pie filling. You just want the pumpkin puree. That's it. Of course, you can make your own pumpkin puree if you happen to have any sugar pumpkins lying around and want to bake those and then puree it. You can do it yourself. And for this recipe, because we're going to be using the immersion blender and we're going to be doing a little bit of pureeing as well, you wouldn't necessarily, you could even get by with just even cooking some pumpkin in here. Now, let's say that you didn't have any pumpkin or that you prefer butternut squash. A can of pureed butternut squash is a great option, or even chunking up some butternut squash and you can cook them in the broth, and then we're going to blend everything up as well. So there's a lot of different options for how you can do this. I'm going to go ahead and add in my pumpkin once the onion is done cooking. So we'll keep an eye on the time, make sure that we have enough time to cook all of this. And let me talk a little bit about what goes into pumpkin spice. So pumpkin spice there's a lot of different recipes out there for pumpkin spice. You can buy one that's already made. This is one from Trader Joe's, and it just comes all already pre-mixed. This one is interesting because this one has some lemon peel in it, which is a little bit, I find, unusual for a pumpkin pie spice or pumpkin spice. And maybe because this is pumpkin pie spice versus just pumpkin spice. But if you want to make your own, it's 1 tablespoon of cinnamon and then a teaspoon, where is it? A teaspoon of ginger, a half teaspoon of nutmeg, and then a little bit of allspice and cloves, 1/4 teaspoon allspice, 1/4 teaspoon cloves. Now, anybody want to take a guess out of all of these spices here, which one has the highest amount of antioxidants and is also known as a really, really potent antibacterial? Anybody want to take a guess? And while you guys are guessing, I see somebody asked that they just joined and want to know what we're making. We are making 2 things today. We're making a pumpkin spice soup, And then we're also going to be making a baked oatmeal for breakfast with pumpkin spice as well. And yes, whoever said cloves, you are correct. Gram for gram, cloves have more antioxidants than pretty much any other food. They are extremely high in antioxidants, as are all the other spices. We tend to think of spices just as being kind of things that we add to give a nice flavor to foods. But the real magic of spices is really all of the health benefits they have. You know, whether they work as an anti-inflammatory with ginger, cinnamon helps to decrease blood sugar levels. Every single one of these spices has some unique health benefits. So not only do they add the flavor, but lots of health benefits. And they also were used really for hundreds, if not thousands of years as medicine before, you know, we had kind of modern day drugs. People use spices as to heal themselves with. So, but now we kind of think of it more just as a flavoring kind of thing. All right. And I see somebody else was going to go with cloves too. So you are all 100% correct. I'm going to kind of move this soup along a little bit since we don't have that much time, but you can cook the onions a little bit more. They are starting to soften up. They're getting a little bit, starting to get a little browned. If you want, you can continue cooking them for another 10, 20 minutes or so they get really a little bit more caramelized, a little bit more browned. But because we're moving things along, we're just going to go ahead and add in the other things. So I now have 1 clove of garlic that I've chopped up. And most recipes call for browning onions first and then adding the garlic. And there's a reason for that. The reason why is that, well, number one, you can let the garlic sit a little bit longer. And when it sits, it forms a lot of the compounds that are these compounds that are benefiting our health, called allicin. And it takes about 10 minutes for the different enzymes to do their work and to create these very healthy compounds. Once you cook it, then that process stops. So by adding the garlic second, you allow it to sit a little bit longer. And garlic burns very easily. And when garlic burns, it gets very bitter and it's really not all that pleasant. So I'm going to go ahead and add in my spices. So for this one, we're going to add in a teaspoon of rosemary as well. And rosemary is one of these other spices that's very beneficial for us. It's very high in many different types of antioxidants. And anybody want to know what rosemary is especially beneficial for? When we think of rosemary, what kind of organ do you think of that rosemary is really good for? Put it in the chat if you want to take a guess. Rosemary is not considered to be a spice. Rosemary is an herb. Anything that's the leaves of a plant is an herb. Any other part of the plant is considered to be a spice. So it could be the bark, it could be, you know, the seeds. Those are all spices. Okay, and then I'm going to add in 1 teaspoon of curry powder. The curry powder has all these warming spices in it, but it also has turmeric in it. And curry just really refers to some extent to a mixture. There's many different types of curries, and this one has in cumin, garlic, but it also then has the nutmeg, the cardamom, the ginger, all of those. We don't want to let this burn, but we're just going to kind of bloom these spices a little bit. And then also adding in 1/4 teaspoon of ginger and some nutmeg. There's my ginger and here's my nutmeg. Now, nutmeg is one of these spices that you don't want to overdo. It is very, very potent. And you will definitely taste it. I think nutmeg and cloves, you know, start by, if you're not quite sure how much to add, start small and then go up from there because they get pretty pungent very quickly. And excessive amounts of nutmeg, because it has so many, unique properties to it, can also be a little dangerous as well. So, most times you wouldn't overdo it on the nutmeg because of the taste, but it does have apparently some like hallucinogenic properties if you overdo the nutmeg. But we're talking like, 2 tablespoons of nutmeg, no amount that anyone would really voluntarily eat. So I added in now I kind of bloomed my spices a little bit. I added in a whole can of pumpkin, and now I'll add in 2 cups my broth. You can use vegetable broth, you could use chicken broth. Um, you could use, if you didn't have vegetable broth or chicken broth, you could just use some water and add in some more salt. But I've got 2 cups of chicken broth. I'm going to stir in there and just let that cook a little bit. And then also, for a little bit of sweetness, we're going to add in a 1/4 cup of apple cider. I was looking for the regular apple cider at the store this morning. I went to Trader Joe's. Trader Joe's is lovely. It's wonderful. It's one of my favorite stores, but you never quite know what you're going to get sometimes. So they only had the spiced apple cider, and I'm fine with that. A little bit extra spice. I look at it as just a little extra health benefits. So I see we have a comment here about, okay, somebody guessed liver. Um, many spices are very good for your liver and can support liver health. But rosemary is especially known for being very good for your brain and potentially helping to increase focus, concentration, and maybe even preventing dementia. So that's kind of what I always think about when I think of rosemary. All right, we're also adding in some salt. And here we go. So I'm adding in 1 teaspoon of kosher salt. This kosher salt is the diamond kosher salt. So I'm adding in a teaspoon. If you use Morton's kosher salt, Morton is actually twice as much by weight. So 1 teaspoon is going to weigh a lot more of the Morton salt, and it's basically double the amount of salt. So if you're using Morton's kosher salt, I would suggest, start with 1/2 teaspoon and then, work up from there if you need a little bit more. So I also see we have a question about bone broth. I think bone broth does have a lot of health benefits to it. It's very high and a little bit higher in some of the minerals that maybe you find in bones, a little bit higher in calcium, but it's also very high in collagen. And we don't tend to eat a lot of collagen, right? Most of us don't like chewy things. We cut off the grizzle, we take off all the skin. Right? As Americans, we eat the chicken breasts, and that's about, maybe some chicken thighs here and there, but that's about it. So bone broth is very high in collagen, and collagen has some unique amino acids that are not considered to be essential amino acids. However, the glycine, the proline, hydroxyproline are these 3 amino acids that you find mostly in collagen and kind of like the chewy bits of the animal. And there's been some studies suggesting that they can have some unique health benefits, including supporting our own bones and also our joints. So some interesting studies. Most of it was done with supplements, not with bone broth. So we can't say yet that bone broth is going to have all these unique health benefits because we haven't had a lot of studies just with the bone broth. They've been mostly type of collagen supplements, but people have been using bone broth for thousands of years as a really healing food. And so until I hear differently, I'm going to go with bone broth as a very healing type of food. And I think that kind of ancient wisdom, we're just kind of catching up with a lot of it now. And the only thing you really have to lose is, bone broth is more expensive, so it's going to be a little bit more expensive. Okay, so We're moving our soup along here because I have to keep an eye on the time. And what we're going to do now is the onions are softened, the garlic's cooked, it's cooked for about 10 minutes or so. We're going to, you could serve it like it is with some chunks in it. But you can also take your immersion blender. So I'm going to move this over into my bowl. And for those of you who heard our conversation earlier, this is why I cover my laptop um, with plastic wrap, because mistakes do happen. Okay, so I'm going to take my immersion blender. You could also put this in a blender. I have a Vitamix that does a beautiful job with this, but the immersion blender is really nice. It kind of does it very quickly, and you don't necessarily want to be, blending up hot things. Typically, I do this in my. Okay. So typically I do this in my pot, and it splatters a little bit less. Um, so you could have it, it's not completely blended at this point, but it's good enough. And then lastly, you can, if you want, you can add in a little bit of coconut cream, you can add in a little bit of half and half, you can add in many different things. I'm just going to add in a tablespoon of heavy cream. And you can, if you're adding in half and half, you can add a little bit more, but just a tiny, you don't need a ton, but just a little bit to give it some creaminess. But you can also completely skip that and make it, especially if you're 100% plant-based, then just skip it. So going to give that a stir, and then go ahead and serve it. So here we go. We got a creamy pumpkin soup. Um, that is great as a first course. And let's see, I already used, I'm looking for my ladle, and apparently it's in the dishwasher because I already used it this morning. So typically I would use a ladle for this. And typically I would blend this a little bit more, so it was a little bit more blended, but just in the interest of time. Then lastly, if you want, you could top it off with some yogurt, like a little drizzle of yogurt would be nice. And sometimes I like to add in some crunchy things. So even adding in some pumpkin seeds would go very well with a lot of the warming spices. Pumpkin seeds are incredibly healthy. They're high in protein. They're very high in a lot of minerals. In fact, this bag lists all the mineral content because it's so crazy high. It's 60% of the daily value for manganese, 40% of the daily value for magnesium. So on and on, really high in minerals. Um, and had I cooked this soup a little bit more, it would be a little, thicker. If you want a little thicker, you can add less broth. You can cook a little bit of the water off. And then another thing that you should do before you serve it is just to taste it. Mm, it's yummy. I wish you all could taste it. Um, it's got a tiny bit of sweetness from the apple cider. It's got all the flavor of the spices, a little bit of the curry. It could be a little hotter, and the onion could be a little bit more cooked. So when you're making it at home, it's going to be just perfect. But even with kind of the very quick job that I did, it's still delicious. So I'm looking forward to having more of it later. Okay, so I'm going to put this all aside, and I'm going to show you my baked oatmeal. I'm a big fan of baked oatmeal because you get some protein from the eggs. We're going to add in a half a cup of pumpkin. So you get, and then we're also going to increase the protein from the cottage cheese. So while I kind of whisk my eggs, I've got 4 eggs in a bowl. I'm gonna take a look at some of these questions. Okay. So somebody said, is it bad to put the immersion blender in the pan you cooked it in? No, it's not. The only reason I didn't is that pan was so shallow that I was really worried about it splattering all over the thought. And I didn't want pumpkin all over my white shirt. So when I do it in my big kind of soup pot, which I didn't use because I kind of wanted you to be able to see it a little bit more, I put the immersion blender right in the pot. No problem whatsoever. You don't have to move it to a bowl. The other question somebody asked, what are your thoughts about Himalayan salt? Himalayan salt really, I do use it. I have it in my salt kind of grinder. It's pretty. It maybe has some extra minerals in it. Um, does it have a lot of health benefits versus any other salts? I mean, maybe you could argue a tiny bit, but at this point, I don't really see a ton of extra health benefits. I mainly use it because it's pretty for the taste, but you have to think about where you're getting your iodine from. If you don't like seafood, you don't eat seaweed, or you don't eat dairy, you really want to use a salt that has some iodine added into it because iodine is a really important mineral that not a lot of other food sources have it in it. So it is something that you kind of want to pay attention to and maybe use one that's has a salt that has iodine in it, which the Himalayan does not. Okay, so I've got my 4 eggs. I'm adding in half a cup of my pumpkin puree. And this is where, you definitely would want to use the pumpkin puree. But while I have this big spoon out, I'm going to grab in a half a cup of cottage cheese. And I like to add the cottage cheese just for some extra protein. So cottage cheese is one of these foods that's really high in protein. And for breakfast, many times people don't kind of forget about some of the protein. It's really easy to get a lot of carbs for breakfast. Sometimes we forget about the protein a little bit. So I usually try to get a solid 15 to 20 grams of protein for my breakfast. So that's why I'm adding in some cottage cheese. If you don't like dairy, just keep the cottage cheese out. You don't have to add it. You could also add in, if you were somebody who used collagen powder, you could add in some collagen powder. I've done that before. You could add in some protein powder. So a lot of flexibility with this recipe. Right, then we're also going to add in the pumpkin, as I mentioned before. Here's a question for you all. What gives pumpkin its beautiful orange color? Anybody know? What gives it the color? And then I'm seeing magic. Yes, that's a good answer. The color that you see in winter in squash, that orange color that you see in carrots and squash, it's also in things like kale and spinach, but we don't see it because all of the chlorophyll in those. But it's beta carotene. And apparently, and let me know if I've got this wrong, but my understanding is that when leaves turn color, the leaves that you see outside, they lose their chlorophyll and you see the beta carotene, and that's why they turn orange. So I've heard that before. Don't quote me on that, but that's what I've heard. Okay, so we got 5 minutes here. So far I have 4 eggs, half a cup of pumpkin puree, half a cup of cottage cheese. I added in 1 cup of milk. I like to use the almond milk because it doesn't have a lot of carbs. Because we're doing a lot of carbs from the oatmeal, I want to focus and make sure it's really balanced in terms of the amount of protein and carbs that I'm getting. So that's why I like the almond milk. You can use regular milk too if you like. Then we're adding in 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. And typically you can measure it out. Many times I just go like, boop, and I guess how much a teaspoon is. Once you've cooked for a while, you kind of get a sense of what the amounts are. And this is not going to be something where if I get a little less, a little more, it's not going to make that big of a deal. You do want to measure out the salt though, because if you add too much salt, this is going to be very salty. The recipe calls for a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. I'm going to put an 1/8 teaspoon in because what we're going to do with our baking dish is we're going to butter the bottom of it. And this happens to be grass-fed salted butter. So I don't want too much extra salt in there. So that's why I only put in a teaspoon, an 1/8 of a teaspoon. Don't forget the salt though. Salt makes baked goods taste sweeter. So if you don't add the salt in, it's going to be bland and you're not going to get that flavor that you want. Don't forget the salt. So then also we have our pumpkin pie spice. I'm going to add in 1 teaspoon of the pumpkin pie spice. It's already mixed. And then 1 cup of my oats. There we go. I'm going to mix that all up. Now you can also add in a little bit of sweetness, or you can add in some diced dates. You know, there's different ways to add in sweetness. I actually like to use this. This is a non-nutritive sweetener. It's made from squash, and it's made from something called a kabocha squash. And it doesn't impact your blood sugar levels like regular sugar does. And you can use it to bake with. It's a 1-to-1 ratio. So you can add in honey, you can add in maple syrup. I tend to like this. It gives a little bit of sweetness. And so I'm just going to use this, but you can use regular sugar too, and that's fine as well. Okay, so we'll mix this all together. And then I'm keeping an eye on the time, so we're gonna pretend like I mix this all together and I put it in here, and let me show you what it looks like. So we're gonna put this in a 350-degree oven for about 30 minutes or so. And then this is what it looks like. So you can see, you don't want to over bake it. You want it so it doesn't, it doesn't jiggle. This has been sitting out for a little bit. It's still a little bit warm. You just want it so it barely stops jiggling. And then I'm also going to give you all the recipe so that you can take a screenshot. I don't know if that's any better with less light. Okay, so there's recipe number 1. We'll bring it a little bit closer. Anybody wants to take a screenshot of that? Here is recipe number 2. You want to take a screenshot of that. And this one, the spiced pumpkin soup, I adapted from the New York Times. So it is different, a little bit different than the New York Times one. I, substituted olive oil instead of butter, cut down on the fat. But okay, so somebody said that they can't see it. All right, let me hold these up again. Yeah, and if anybody else has any other questions, let me know. I'm going to try again with the recipe. Okay, there's one. Hopefully you can see that and take a screenshot. And then here is recipe number 2. And I'm trying to get that close and take a screenshot of that. All right. Let's see. Okay. So it's exactly 1:30. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us here today. Hopefully you got your questions answered and you were able to take a screenshot of the recipes. And I wish you all a wonderful fall, and it looks like we still have this continued beautiful weather. So thanks again, everyone, for joining us here today. Bye.